Welcome to this live workshop on language matters, on inclusion, privilege, and norms, where we will go through a lot of interesting topics today. And we will, as it is a workshop, we will use the chat and also a tool that's called Slido. And I'll give more instructions on this later on. But first of all, warmly welcome. And please feel free to use the chat throughout to ask questions or add comments. This is a workshop where we create together. I will give examples from the languages I speak, but as this is a polyglot gathering, we all speak a variety of different languages, and I want you all to jump in whenever we speak about different topics, what experiences you have from the languages you speak or the languages you are learning. So warmly welcome, and let's get started. So I want to just set the ground with this upside down map, where it is really about how we see the world. And we will look into that further, but I think a good start is to see how different worldviews actually creates different kind of structures. And there is about 6,500 to 7,100 languages in the world. So we use languages a lot. I mean, you all know this as polyglotters. And so we base it on this, that we have all these languages and that our world looks quite different depending on who you ask. And so first of all, my name is Nathalie. I work in international development mainly, and I also have my own company where I train on sustainability matters, anti-discrimination and inclusion. And I do it most of my time as a graphic facilitator. So I use the icons that you see behind me as a way to help people get away from stereotypical language and prejudices by using icons to help and support learning. And I also work quite dedicated with the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development Goals. And today we will look into different ways of including people. And one approach to this is norm creativity. Previously, you might have heard about norm criticism, which is where you criticize and you work against the norms that you find complicated or difficult or that you want to question. Norm creativity takes it one step ahead and instead say, how can we be so creative when it comes to creating the norms that we wish or want to see around us? Before we start going into the actual session, please write something in the chat if you want. Of course, it's all voluntary, but write where you're local right now and what's your name. And this is a good start of asking people. You can ask them where they're from, but in a lot of countries, this is quite complex because maybe where they're from is not where you think they're from. And so the prejudices coming to that can lead to a lot of exclusion or microaggressions, which we will talk to later. So where are you local or where are you right now is a good way of starting a conversation, at least in Sweden, rather than asking where are you from. And if you want to ask maybe what company you're from or what organization or something, then you also have to specify that because other people might misunderstand them depending on what questions they normally get. So this is one first example of how you can really include everyone and they decide themselves where they feel local, whether that's their background, where their parents from, where they live right now, where their heart is, and so on. So you leave it up to them to define their own local. Why do I call this session Language Matters? We all know that language is important, and the last few days we've heard a lot of sessions about different things, why language is important. But for me, when it comes to inclusive language, why is that important? Foremost, it's a human right that everyone should feel included and feel that they belong and be not discriminated against. But if you look at the more values that maybe other people take, and it's because diversity matters. Diversity helps increase innovation and creativity. Workspaces with people from different countries, different backgrounds, help create new solutions, and that normally creates more money, more revenue for companies. So it's something that you can really point on as a reason to work on. There is also a lot of research globally done that show that diverse teams are more healthy. which also saves money, at least in the countries where the company is the one paying for your sick leave or sending off teamwork activities to create better surroundings if there is a toxic environment or people is feeling excluded. And in Sweden, which is the example I'm going to take from, is also if an employee is harassed against, or there is bullying going on, or anti-discrimination, the company can actually be fined for not to do anything against it. So it's actually also a cost if you do not work with a positive, inclusive working environment. And I imagine also in schools around the world, there are similar laws on how to treat children and make sure everyone feel included, and that where bullying is worked hard against. It's also a really important way to meet the needs of the clients or the students or whoever you work with, to speak the same language, maybe have an understanding of the cultural or religious or class background. So diverse team also helps broaden the potential clients, and this obviously leads to maybe more client and more funding. So this is all a positive spiral. Sexism, racism, xenophobia, homophobia, whatever it is harmful both to the people that are directly affected, their families, to the mental health, but also to society as such. And so it's something we all have to work, help stopping, questioning, and make sure we in our environment can create a safe and inclusive environment. Because prejudice limits us and harmful the potential development of individuals, but also of our societies. So this is a little bit about the background, why I think this is important. And please feel free to write in the chat if you have another reason why diverse teams or diverse environments is the way to go. So different things impact us and how we function. So we have our values, we have our level of education, what we study that impacts the way we talk, what we think, and so on. So these things are important to take into account. We have power relations between people, between cultures, between religious and aspects of society. There is the inclusion versus exclusion, how that does work. Our actions are colored by a lot of different things. What we believe in, both religious, but also other beliefs that we have on what is important in life, our thoughts, our socioeconomic. So all these things impact the language we speak. And you probably already know all of this, but then we're going to look into a few of these aspects that really colors the way we talk. So norms is a construct of expectations on me as an individual, or from society, or from coworkers, or from colleagues, or from family. They are on different levels, and they can also be different. Maybe your colleagues expect you to work and have a career, while your family have other expectations of creating a family at early age, or so on. So expectations can change from different groups in society, but it's kind of a picture of what's supposed to be, about what's normal, whatever that means, and what's the ideal situation in a certain culture, a certain aspect of your life. And it's closely related to power. And then on the bottom line, you can see aspects of norms. So they're taught. We learn them as children. We learn them in different subcultures. We learn them from our parents, from our colleagues, maybe from television, media, music. And they're obvious. They are so obvious to the person living in the norm that we sometimes don't see them. We talk about them being invisible for the person living with the norm or with the privilege. It's based on situation. You can have a norm status be very close to the norm. So you follow the norms of society in one situation, in another you're not. Maybe at your workspace, you work in something that is typically and normal for your gender or for your background. But so there you're really in the norm, you're close to the center of the norm, but maybe your hobby or who you love is very far from the norm. So it's also the same person can follow some norms and be against others. And the negative part, and why for me this is very important to speak with you, is norms have consequences. When you do not follow the norms, you can have consequences. Sometimes it's just someone looking at you a little bit weird, raising their eyebrows, not talking to you, excluded from social activities. But some norms, if you do not follow them or you're very far from them, it could lead to harassment, violence, and even death when people think you have no right to be the way you are. And so it's really important that we work against this because of the consequences. And norms is closely related to privileges, what we can and cannot do, what we can say, what jobs we can get, what neighborhoods we can live in, where we can travel in the world, is also closely connected to this. Whether our holidays are taken for granted, or if no one even knows when our holidays is. So all these things are related to the norms. And the positive part, which is what I want to end with before going to the next slide, is it is possible to change. Our norms has changed throughout time. What was normal then is not today. That comes with laws, that comes with how we treat each other, and so on. So it's really important when you go into the workshop now to take with us, we can change norms, but we need to know how. And one of the first steps is to realize our own power relations. When two people or more meet, there is a kind of a power, whether that is an equal power, someone is above the other, and there's the aspect of majority and minority. And when it comes to language, power is really important. Who decides what language is spoken? Who decides what language we're not allowed to speak? What power is connected to speaking a certain language to another? Because even in countries where you have minorities that are actually in majority, their language is not spoken, for example, or your language is legally allowed to speak. It's an official language. You have internet sites, you have schools, you have teachers, but you won't really get a job, or people will look down to you because you speak that language. Even if it's legal and it's official, it might have consequences because you're far away from the norms. And there are different things intersecting. So whether you're a woman or a man, if you're indigenous or have a disability and speaking a certain language, you're connecting to things that comes far away from the norm. And one really important thing, which is what you see in this image, is that norms are created in 3 different ways. It's the way we think. It's how we learn, how we create it at home in our family situation and institutions. So schools, politics, media, these 3 different spheres is where power and norms are created. And this is also maybe where some of you work, where some of you are engaged. And that's why it's important to see how we can use this power in a positive way to include more people, if that is what we want. So I want you to start. Either you can write in the chat number 1 to 5, but don't click enter. Just write the numbers, or take a piece of paper and write number 1 to 5. And then I want you to think, who are you? So write 1 word per number. Who are you? When someone asks you, who are you? What do you answer? Or if you reflect on it yourself, who are you? So write down these 5 words. Can be anything. Great. I hope you all have started at least. If you want, please feel free to write in the chat, but it's not necessary. Yes, I see some words. So gender is one thing. What ethnicity you have. It might be what title at work you have, what position in a relationship you have, your relationship to other people. Inhabitant of the earth, human, thank you. So all of these words, I put an adjective. It's an adjective, so it can really be anything. And if we would compare all of your post-its or letters that you just did, teacher, friend, learner, these are all different things. And none of them are wrong. I posed one question and you answered with no explanations. And this is important because these are your closest identities when I ask you or anyone asks you a question. But if I say, first of all, I am maybe my title, and another person says their ethnicity, who am I to judge what is right? And the problem is that most of the time, we put titles on other people's identities. And so when we ask this question, we really need to be open. And we also need to be careful so we don't color the way people say their identities because they know what we kind of expect. So when you're, yeah, so who are you? Oh, I should say my title, or I should say my name, or I should say, you know, or if I say my first and almost identity is maybe being a mother or a father. but I'm in a professional network and everyone else is saying their title. What happens with the power dynamics? What happens? So it's really important to know, first of all, who am I? What is my identity? And take this with us into the next activity. Because when we start talking about identities, we also have the inclusive language. And I'm going to give some examples from different languages on how you can use this. And it's about helping including more people and helping questioning what is normal. So we always say president and we say female president because it's like, yeah, you know, if it's just a president, we know it's a male. If you start saying male president and female president, then you're helping creating an equality in this. And for some people, this might be ridiculous or think it's a lot of extra work or what is this going to change? But if people do this, if you say male football, female football, and so on, you're actually really going to see the change in how people talk and how people feel included. And here in Sweden, there's been a big war on milk. When in Sweden, most people drink something in their coffee or tea. And so back in the days, you said milk, and it was understood it's cow milk. But then we had all these percentages, have 0.5, 1%, 3%, 5%. And then it was like, what is really milk? And then you had people being vegan and drinking Oatly and soya milk and so on. So when you ask someone for milk, it wasn't really obvious what it is. And you have allergies, they had lactose free. And so people wrote milk, and then they wrote soya milk and Oatly milk. And it's like, but then, you know, so they started writing cow milk, soya milk, oat milk, and whatnot. And it's really a way to include more. And it's so simple steps to really help. And I'm just giving this example because it's really, you know, you could probably see these jars on a coffee place or in a restaurant or in a takeaway place. You can see this visual and try to see how can this be used in the way you work? How can you make things over obvious and to include more people, whether that is on gender, on dressing rooms, on toilets, on language you use in a daily basis, whether there is information signs, if that is on food, to always just make this is normal food and this is for vegans and allergic, instead of just this is what we have. Try to see how can you use this in your setting and take this milk example, which got quite a lot of attention here in Sweden. Another way is to explain abbreviations. Maybe we work in a sector where we use a lot of abbreviations. And it's excluding to people who are new to the setting, who have maybe another mother tongue, or even in a company, your subdivision or sub-team might actually use certain abbreviations that the rest doesn't know. And we use them so often, we just say them. And then, especially now in Zoom meetings, you can see how someone starts like, oh, what does that mean? And you see them start Googling. And this just creates a gap. You're the one transmitting something, right? You're the one saying, teaching, informing about something. So it's in your responsibility to see that it lands well in the other person, because you can, through that, create another gap, another exclusion to a certain people. And this goes, of course, also for social events or in informal chit chats, where someone just like gets further and further mentally out of the circle, because you cannot hang along, because it's, yeah, so tomorrow I'm going to this PG and do this, you know, and then in the end, you don't know what the person is talking about. And then you get the question, oh, so what do you think about this? And you cannot answer. And this creates really an exclusion, especially in settings, at least in Sweden, we have a lot of immigrants for different reasons who have come to Sweden, whether it's to work, fleeing another country, or just moving here for different reasons. And so we have all these ethnicities and different cultures and languages. And it's really important how to include everyone to feel at home. Because you should never take for granted that people know everything that you know. Another thing to be aware of is how you ask questions. Because you can open up for conversation, you can open up and show who you are the way you ask questions. And so if I say, oh, what's the name of your boyfriend to my female friend, I'm putting my prejudice, my norms into the questions, because I expect, because you're a woman, you have a boyfriend. If I ask, what's the name of your partner, or do you have a partner, or who do you live with, and open up, because otherwise this person has to say, no, I don't have a boyfriend, I have a girlfriend. And this creates unnice atmosphere, an unnice way of starting a conversation, which for you was just like, I just wanted to be nice. But that's not how it's viewed. And we see it more and more in different questionnaires, information that you have to give, where you ask. So on the image, it says, what do you identify as? So we're not saying what gender do you have, what sex, what so. We're asking, what do you identify as? And then you can put women, man, or other. And we see this more and more in Sweden because of the openness and inclusion of anyone independent of your gender or identity. So please write in the chat what questions you could use to become more inclusive. So please write any idea you have in your own language, what it is. I see here to also ask for pronouns. That's really good, especially now in times of Zoom meeting. You can ask people to rename themselves and put in parentheses their pronoun. How do you want to be called? Yes. Others sound a bit exclusive, but it is. This is a government document, a government formula that I took a picture of. And for them to actually start asking anything but men and women is really a big step. So I think at the moment we should be, thankful that they have a third. Before they only had two and they really just wanted to stay with two. So this is a big step. Where are you from? Where are you tuning in? Yes. And especially, what do you want to be called? Who are you? Instead of just asking your name, say, and it's connected again to the 5 identities that we ask, that I asked you to fill out previously. What's your story? Yes. Great, thank you. So continue writing good questions and sharing. So whether it's relevant to ask these questions or not, most companies or organizations need it for statistical reason. Normally it says why. Sometimes it's because, if you have a youth program, it's funded by someone, you need to know how many men and women are there. And that's basically today how things are measured. Sometimes it's about putting people together. At least when I do a lot of coordination for conferences, you need to put them in the same rooms maybe, so you need to know the gender, or for other reasons. But yeah, you shouldn't ask for gender if it's not necessary. Definitely you could ask for other things that are more important. A good comment, how to simply avoid certain questions, definitely. But it's also, if you can't avoid them, or if you need to ask them, how can you make them more inclusive? Because we don't want to stop talking to each other, but definitely start thinking, and we will come back to that later, how you actually ask questions. I don't know if some of you are teaching. Please raise your hand on the digital one, or just show us something. So yeah, teaching maybe your own language, like your mother tongue, or you're teaching other, whether that is children, youth, or adults. Teaching is also really connected to the power of language and to the norms of society. So at least when I grew up, my math books was always Anna, Johan, they had 3 apples and 4 pears, and how much is that together? Or these 3 children, they have, they have to drive their vacation home and so many kilometers. And it's really just a math exercise. It was there to create a problem, so I would show my teacher how well my math was. But it always used very stereotypical normative names. And it was always, Anna is doing the dishwashing. How many plates does she need to put in to feel, And then it was Eric was climbing a mountain or working in the office. So all these stereotypes is created throughout. So I put some examples here of on the screen in different languages. So ma famille, il y a une sœur et 2 frères. So you're just teaching or reading out the text about a family situation. You're learning mother, father, uncle, cousin, in this case in French, and use non-stereotypical sentences. So it says, in my family, it's me, my sister, and my 2 fathers. They still learn the words, but you're using a non-stereotypical setting. Or if you want to just talk about dates and stuff, instead of always using the normative holidays or traditions, in this case, I used Ramadan. Or when you explain who you live with, because those are the exercises you probably all remember from initial, in any language. You learn how to say who your family is, what's the color of your hair, all these examples. How can you make them more broad and more inclusive? And also, again, back to the stereotypes of men and women. So here you have two women, Thea and Natasha, besteigen den Mount Everest, während ihr Männer zu Hause auf den Kindern aufpassen. So you're explaining maybe verbs or subjects by using non-stereotypical, because we expect the women to be home with the kids. That's how generally teaching books have been doing. So you can just see them, and also including different names. So the last sentence is Abraham, Sophie, and Kim, rather than just Anna and Sarah, which all my teaching books were when I grew up. And also include interests that are a bit more non-normative than normally just football, drawing, and singing, to really help, because otherwise how are you going to learn these things? Obviously, most good teachers, they ask you to learn the things you are relevant to you, but I think it's also in your examples able to open up for conversation. You see there's some comments coming in, thank you. Yeah, so I took here the grandma's Instagram, which is also this discrimination against elderly, because they're old, they don't follow up with technology. So if you use an example, you still get the verbs, you still get the grammar, which is maybe the word you want to teach your students. And here grandma is updating her Instagram. And so you can really use language to change the way people think, and to be part of creating a more inclusive society. And so I want you to go to the website slido.com, and then the password is Polyglot, and you can just write anything in any language, how you can become more inclusive. I already seen a lot of examples in the chat, but it would be nice to see more of you, and also people who are just watching the live stream can do this. So take a minute to do this, and it can be full sentences or words, and you can send it and then redo. So you can send as many examples as you want to. And we will come back to this one a bit later. The poll will be open, so you can just continue to hand in your answers, and we will continue with the presentation. So I'm going to give some examples from some of the languages I speak. So Swedish is my mother tongue. And here we have a very, so you say either him or her. And if you're giving an example where it's not really relevant, then we haven't really had a word. You had to say him and her. And we started a few years back, it came a word was hen, which is a mix up of han and hon, so he and she. And it was widely questioned whether children are going to be brainwashed in kindergarten if they learn this word. They don't want to know if they're a he or a she or anything else if they learn this. And it's still not totally accepted by academia and the on the higher level, but you can see it in formal text, you can see it in government websites, not yet in writings and laws, but yeah, in websites, you see it in examples, you see people on news, on radio. If they want to give an example of a general person, they just say hen. Or if they want to retell a story where they don't want it to be clear whether it's what the gender of the person is, they use hen. Do you know any other in your languages? I know a lot of languages only have one word, some have three. So please post in the chat if there's in your language a way to include when you want to say, give an example, but you doesn't really matter the gender of the person.
I didn't understand what does hen and han mean in English?
So han is he and hun is she, and then in the middle they created a new word. So this word is totally new and it's not yet totally incorporated in academia. It's hen, which is like she and he put together. So the first letter and this last, and then an E in the middle.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, keep your examples coming. It's really interesting. Them, yeah. In Finnish, they have han for both he and she. Singular they you can use. In Persian, you use o, yes. Dia is he or she. Great, thank you. Han, hun, and han, yeah. So then you have to use them in Icelandic, I see. Esperanto has re for non-gender specific third person. In German, they don't have anything, so you have to say un sie or the un sie. So always use bro. Il in French. Thank you. Keep it coming. And I will go into Spanish, where the grammar structure, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, is like, it doesn't matter if it's 100 women and 1 man, you still say it, the verb, the way you conjugate it, as if they're all just men. So when you say welcome, you say bienvenidos, independent of if there's 1 man in the group. If it's only women, then you say bienvenidas. But if there is, independent of the number of men and women, you always use and it's very excluding. It's to say, hi, all you men, but not you women. I mean, if you would analyze what it actually means grammarly, and that's how it's been used, but it's been questioning more and more when, in a way to highlight gender equality. So I work with a lot of organizations in all of Latin America with what's called lenguaje inclusivo, the inclusive language, in a way to create this. So there are a few different ways. One is to always say bienvenidos y bienvenidas, todos y todas, which makes sentences quite long, which makes them very repetitive, because you have to say ellos y ellas, so they, male they and female they are going to the beach, for example, ellos y ellas van a la playa, and then you have to say ellos y ellas again. So it's really long sentences, and you have to repeat this all the time. This is one way. Another one, and that we see more and more especially in written, are these 3 last you can see on the screen. It's to change it to s, so todes instead of todas y todos, or put an x in the middle of where the O or A would be, or the at sign, arroba. For example, niños y niñas, when you don't want to exclude female girls, female children, girls in the English version, you say niños y niñas, or you can say in a written text, you use this. And this is really in social media, people who are aware, who work with these issues, which is most of what I do, they really use this. I know that Real Academia has not yet, haven't approved it, and similar to the situation in Sweden, academia is not yet into this, but you can see it from organization, in social media, in official writings, on websites. When I receive an official report from the projects I work with, they use these kind of writing. So feel free to write if in your language there is a way of changing a letter that makes something more inclusive. Continue writing, and I will go through the chat. So 30 messages right now since I read the last time, so a lot of good things coming in. So please continue. Sier in German, a new way, probably also not yet accepted by academia. Yeah, there's a lot of new things. Germany has been a bit later than, for example, Sweden, Spanish, and also English. But yeah, you can see more of this. Yeah, some things also stay in subcultures and then get out of them. So LGBTI communities, that's maybe where they start. The story of hen in Sweden, for example, was created among people who really value equality and inclusiveness, and then it was created to schools, to companies, to organizations. So it might start small, and then more and more people start using it. Similar to putting the pronoun connected to your name on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on your Zoom meeting, or so on. It came like a few years back, but now it's, at least in the meetings I am, very common that people do that. So also different settings have different ways of doing it and how fast. So 3 genders in Czech: he, she, and it has on, ona, and ono. So you see here, a lot of people are posting about the German, how they recently heard about it. And this is what I talked about in the beginning about norms. They change. If we start using something and more people use it, and people ask, why do you say this? What does this mean? Ah, that's great. And then I start using it, and then another one asks me, and that's how we create this change. And that is how change comes, when we do the things differently. Yeah, person of color is a way to also, when it comes to ethnicity, and also, I don't know, for example, when it comes to people with disability, in Sweden, we've had a long journey with that, from a handicapped person to a person with a disability, to say that the person is a person, first of all, and has a disability rather than a disabled person. So all of these things are really, really important, because they say what we value, what is, it's a person, first of all, and that then person has some kind of disability of hearing, seeing, walking, or what it might be. Thank you. We will continue. And I will open up the poll again. So please, if you have more examples, let them come and I'll show you the answers. Nice. Yeah, throw away your prejudice. I mean, our prejudices are created by our brains in a way to help us structure the day, help us structure the way we work, so we don't have to take decisions every second of everything. But they can also be harmful. And it's not to say that no one has, there's no one who doesn't have prejudice. It's how we put them into practice. Do we listen to the prejudices? Where do they come from? Do they have any fact? Do we know this? Are we affected by media, political parties, colleagues, friends, family? But to question the privileges that we have in relation to the prejudices that we do have about other people. Okay, this person comes from this country, so they, and it could be both positive and negative. Like Swedish people are generally, the prejudice is that we are very punctual. we are very good at time management. I suck at that. And so if someone would hire me just because I'm Swedish and therefore should be good at time management, you don't get what you ask for. So it's really important to just, okay, I have these prejudices, I know that, put them aside and get to know the person in front of you. And to really also think what questions are necessary. Is this because of your curiosity? So is it your curiosity, or are you, is there something behind this question? It's also really important to ask. Yeah, so there's a comment about people actually tend to prefer disabled or autistic rather than person with. Yes, when you talk directly, but when you talk about people, normally in texts, to empower people, it's a person and not, they're not their disability. That's what I wanted to say with that. But it's always better to ask, how do you want to be named? How does your disability affect you? Because maybe for that person on their identity paper with the 5 identities, they don't even put down their disability. And then if it's a big issue for you, it becomes a problem. For other people, maybe it's the first thing. I'm autistic. That is the first thing on my identity list. Then it's not going to be a problem. Thank you for the example. Nurse in English is still considered to be a woman, whereas male nurse sounds like important. Yeah, so what you can do is say female nurse and male nurse is one way to really start getting people questioning, but you still have, if you only say doctor, if you only say a certain name, people are still going to think something, and that's why we have to question, and it's not going to happen overnight. Thank you, so good. Everyone should really go through the chat. It's really, really good. A lot of examples from different, and sometimes we have, male midwife. In Sweden, we have a fire, like the correct translation from firefighter is fireman in Sweden. And so it was a big discussion whether it's called fireman and firewoman, but it became very weird to say it. So it's brandman, och sen blev det brandkvinna. And then they started to just say brandperson, so a fire person. For some people, it's silly, they don't want to use it, and others are really starting to use this in a lot of businessman is also a male, so business person, if you say it in Swedish. Yeah, or then like Vanessa's writing mid-husband. There are created all these words, and they are tried. Sometimes it works, things change, sometimes it's not, but it's really a struggle of trying and questioning, so we help our brains not totally directly associate with our prejudices. The chat is, the slide is still open, and I want to finish with some tips. So think twice before you ask, why do I do this? How can it be perceived by the other person? And is this enhancing our relationship? Is this giving me something that I really need? Like someone said in the beginning, do we need to ask for gender in this form? Why? If you're asking what food people like, why do you have to ask for the gender, for example? So do I really need to ask this question? Use open question. The more open, instead of asking, do you have a partner? If that's what you want to know, ask, who do you live with? How does your situation look like? Oh, I live with my grandma. And it's nothing weird. But if I say, ask, who's your partner? And I say my grandma, maybe that's weird. So try to really open up and be curious about the other person, and try to put your prejudices behind. And change comes from within. We need to start. you and I need to start asking these questions. Use all these good examples that you see in the chat in the languages you speak. And if you learn a new language, try to also learn these new things. When I learned Spanish in school back very long time ago, I learned with the ending of O and the ending of A, feminine and masculine. And then when I was in the context working on gender equality, doing my courses, I learned that they speak an inclusive language and I as a teacher did not. And that was very bad for me because that's what I work with. I work with gender equality and I don't even speak a gender inclusive language. And so try to learn that if it's important for you in your target language and challenge others. Like some here wrote, like in Germany, we're seeing these changes in some sub-communities. And try to be not part of cementing norm structures and prejudice. And this goes for your pictures as well. When you use pictures in PowerPoints, if you show something in your classes, who are you representing? Is it always a family of 3 with a male and a female heteronormative relationship? What traditions are you talking about? What pictures are you sending? What prejudices are you cementing or questioning? Are you opening for a brighter, bigger way of understanding Christmas or a certain hobby, for example? And don't limit people's thought streams and views with your stereotypical examples. And especially if you work with children who have yet an open, creative mind to be shaped. Because if they see, with the children I work with now, for them, homosexuality is not a weird thing. Hence, their parents think it's weird to see that in their school book. And so we can be really helping creating a new reality, new norms, and become aware of your own privileges. And so doing this 5 identity exercise with people around you is really one way. How do you see me? How do I see you? Who do we identify as? And then two really good movies. Michael Kimmel on gender is really good, about your own privileges and how to be aware of them. It's really, really short, but really, really spot on. And the other one is Where Are You Local on a TEDx, to really what kind of question you should ask and why not. And thank you. And we have a minute for questions. So please write in the chat if you have any questions. Duolingo has done a good job being inclusive. Yeah, and they also sometimes have really good pictures of a business person or a chef or something that's not always the stereotypical. Yeah, so keep the question coming if anyone has. Yes, Vanessa, please.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I want to make a comment on the issue of gender equality and gender inclusivity, where I agree. In Germany, there's still a long way to go. However, there have been some recent movement, and one prime example has come into force like 2 or 3 years ago, where meanwhile it's actually legally permitted to enter your gender into your birth certificate as diverse. And the other one kind of ties into the Gender Equality Act, which is like an anti-discrimination law. And back in the days, let me type something in the chat. In job ads, job titles were mostly advertised like this: Lehrer or Lehrerin,
yeah.
M/W, which means male, female. And meanwhile, it's actually mandatorily provided by law to add a D. So
yeah, thank you.
Job title has to be advertised as either male, female, or diverse.
Yeah. And also that actually titles are slashed with the in, letterin, actor, actress, and so on.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can see more of that.
I mean, this slash in is still exclusive, but we're actually having some fun discussions right now. So there have been suggestions such as firemensch, such as firefighter, human being. I was a fire Löschkraft.
That's nice. Yeah, you see what's coming up when you start this conversation.
Lehrer, just like a teaching person instead of male of a teacher.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Great, thank you. I will open up the Slido, so please continue if you want, and also follow that. And thank you so much for this really good conversation. I had a good time and I learned a lot from you, so thank you so much. And I wish you all a pleasant continuation of the Polyglot Gathering, and I hope to see you in other sessions. And I really hope you enjoyed learning a bit more about how to include more people around you and why we should do this. So thank you very much.